Okay, I'm Clare Dunphy Hemani. The name of my business is Progressive Bodyworks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm based out of Newburyport, Massachusetts. So we're right on the coast. Hi, Amy Kello. I just saw you pop in.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's
Amazing.
the name of the business. And Progressive Bodyworks is kind of like an umbrella for all the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, you're doing a lot, right? Like, I mean,
I have been focused.
yes. Yes. Right.
It's sort of like what I'm focusing on now is very different than what I had been focusing on before.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise, you know, in many ways. Like, so for me, my focus right now is I'm developing a mentor program.
Okay.
And so I haven't really announced it yet, but it's called Elevate.
Okay.
And
love it.
The thing that's been in the back of my head for the past few years, because I do a lot of presenting and, at conferences and at people's studios all over the world. And what's been really bugging me is this idea that the presenter gets on stage or does their thing, and that's it. It's about the presenter.
Yes.
It's not about the people.
Right.
And so it's just been sort of sticking in my craw a little bit that, these teachers often, they come to me, and often when I talk to teachers, they say, I went through my training program, I take workshops, but I still feel like I have gaps in my learning.
Yes.
And so, and I started thinking about it and just sort of observing the industry and how we operate currently. Mm-hmm. And that is mostly about the presenter, the instructor, the presenter, making it really about themselves. And so I think we're kind of in a place where if we want to bring up the next generation of teachers, we got to get involved in them, in their teaching, and give them mentoring. And I started thinking about, I went to the education forum over the summer. It was an education summit that the PMA put on.
Okay.
And it was so great because one of the things that they were distinguishing was the difference between an instructor, a teacher, and an educator.
Right.
And I thought that was it was brilliant. It really started getting me thinking in terms of the difference between a teacher trainer, like you had in your education
your
course,
original course, yes,
and a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And so after massaging this in place, because I'm not going to be the mentor myself, I am teaching the mentors. I've got a group of about 8 of them.
Okay.
So I'm not even one of the mentors. I know how to do that. I've done that already, So I'm building them up so that they can be mentors, and I'll be helping them be better at what they do. Yes. So one of the first things we had to do was say, well, what's the difference between a teacher trainer and a mentor? And what we came up with was the idea that a teacher trainer just, gives you some information, maybe gives you information about exercises and technique, and maybe some advice on your teaching. The way that on your first education course, the feedback is very, very direct and very, it's like, this is what you need to do. Yes. This is how, whereas a mentor helps you discover for yourself what you need to do better.
Yes.
So that you're not just giving them the correction, so to speak, but you're leading them to see the effect that they have on their client. And is it effective or not? So I'm excited about that as a new project.
So a teacher trainer, it provides, just generally speaking, and obviously we all do more than this, but a teacher trainer provides instruction, whereas a mentor facilitates discovery. Right.
Exactly.
Lovely. I like that. So when people were teaching at conferences in those big formats, I'm sure everyone who went on stage didn't go with the mindset of, this is about me and watch me perform. So where is the gap? Is the gap just in not having time to explain the how to what they're doing, possibly?
Well, I don't know. I think it's the way we've just format our our engagement. Now, of course, in a large venue, it's not really possible, probably, to have individual coaching sessions, individual mentoring, or, you know, but that's only one like venue. I think it's a way to get information in that workshop format.
Right.
But I think a lot of it is going to be in thinking outside of the box a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, letting people break out into smaller groups and experiment.
Yes.
And, you know, kind of help each other. Take that information and then break into smaller groups and help them help each other. And then the presenter can facilitate in each of these pods to help them understand. I mean, that's just one
We're just thinking. Yes, exactly. Emmett Younger puts here in the comment section, isn't it simply that a teacher trainer teaches people to become Pilates teachers and a mentor works with qualified teacher to improve their skills?
That's also true.
Yes. It's a leveling up in a sense. It's a practical application of what you're learning.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because there's still so much to learn after you graduate from whatever
education
program. And so, you know, after say 5 years, there's sometimes more questions than there were before.
Which is a good thing.
Which is always a good thing, right?
Yeah, this is
actually
a really good thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it's dangerous if you don't have any questions 5 years later.
Yeah, or even now, 30 years later, right?
Right. Yes.
Like, it's just staying inside that question, because that's where the fun is, right? That's where the magic happens.
Yes. Staying inside the question. I love that. There's this fascinating evolution that's happening within the Pilates industry. And like in celebrating Brink over the weekend and how Jenna was looking at conferences and teaching and presenting, and what you're doing in this transition from that university lecture style to the small group breakout lab, let's apply what you just learned style.
Right.
There's so many things that are happening. And can you talk about your work, actually talk about your work with Peak and how you got started with Peak Pilates? Because that model is where I launched off of as well.
Right. Well, I didn't realize that you had a little bit of time with Peak.
Mm-hmm. With her name always escapes me just when I'm about to say it here. I'll interrupt you with it in a second as soon as it comes to me.
You know what? When I can't remember, I go through the alphabet until I get to the letter, and I go, "Oh, that's her name."
When I land at Pam Garcia.
Oh, sure.
That's it.
She's great. She's a good one. Okay, so in a nutshell, so I bought my original equipment from Peak before it was even called Peak. So the year was 1997. The class action lawsuit was in 2001.
Okay.
And right after that class action lawsuit, the owner of Peak, it was called Progressive Body Systems back then, was Julie Lobdell. And Julie was an equipment company, but did not have an education branch. Gotcha. And right after the lawsuit was over, she had a meeting. She called a bunch of teachers that come from the Romano lineage primarily. But Bob Leekins was there, Mary Bischoff, the Alper sisters. I was invited. There was like Colleen Glenn was there. Okay. And it was down in Austin, Texas at Wendy Arbuckle's studio. And the whole weekend was focused around one single question. And that question was, can Pilates go mainstream in a responsible manner? Wow. And that was the question that Julie wanted to have answered.
Yes.
At the time, she was in partnership with Wendy's husband, Michael Arbuckle. And so that was that connection. But anyway, by the end of the weekend, it was a resounding yes, that our generation of teachers had the responsibility to somehow bring this out. And maybe we weren't going to all work together, but we were all kind of held it as one of our core beliefs and values.
Yes.
So the following week, I got a phone call from Julie, and she invited me to sort of lead a group of 3 of us to create the comprehensive training program.
Okay.
And those 3 people were Wendy Arbuckle, Colleen Glenn, and myself. Mm-hmm. Anyway, 6 months into it, we all had a lot going on in our lives, and the program wasn't finished, wasn't written. So there was a very short stint, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, where Julie said, listen, we're going to partner with Power Pilates. They're an established education program.
Yes.
And, we have our equipment, so it kind of makes sense to bring these 2 together. Yes. And then she asked me if I'd be like the liaison between the 2, because I really got her global vision, yes, where she really wanted to go and what that needed to kind of look like. And I also come from the fitness world prior to my Pilates world. So mm-hmm. Anyway, she thought that would be a good fit. About 6 months into it, they weren't getting along, Peak and Power.
Okay.
So they broke up. And so then we had to restart again. Okay. Only this time, we brought in Zoe Trapp, because Wendy and Michael's business, they kind of separated also as a partnership.
Okay. So
here we were, the 3 of us, Colleen Glenn, me, and Zoe Trapp. And Zoe has a master's in education, and she was really good with communication. Okay. And the anatomy parts of it. So it went. So we started to build the program, and then it came to the time where we needed to get our first group of teacher trainers together. So we collected the people that we knew, and we started training them. And then we went to Europe, and we started getting people in Europe up and ready to go. And that was kind of my job for a while. It was not only just creating the curriculum, the manual, the lesson plans, all the drills, all the whole, yes, that whole thing. But then we had to have a pathway for these teacher trainers to develop and grow. And so I was the mentor for these teacher trainers.
Yes.
So that was the underpinnings of what kind of moved me sort of forward there.
Interesting.
So
that's a nice little history lesson.
There we go.
How many people in the comment section have heard that story or knew that story before? Because that was like fascinating for me. No, and so Claire, when you heard that there was going to be this divorce of Power Pilates and Progressive, at that point, being on the outside looking in, was it one of those things where like, well, this is reconcilable, or I get it, let's do our own thing, sort of thing?
Well, it was really about money. It always boils down to money with business. And I think that they just couldn't sort it out. So that, and I didn't know all the details because it wasn't really any of my business.
Right.
But, Howard just called one day and said, Claire, are you sitting down? I got something to tell you. And, and he says, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, Julie invited me into this process. So I get her vision. I'm going to just work with her. He still had Bob Leakins and, that his whole crew of people.
Yes.
Susan, Moran. So, they didn't really need me. They kind of were they're good to go on their own. Yes. But for Julie, I felt more of an allegiance, a little bit more of a loyalty.
Yes.
So that was, so I thought that was a good move.
Absolutely. You're, like you said about vision, when you align with someone's vision, it's easy to stick with them and to live it up, because it's your vision as well that is getting out there. I'm sure with your passion for Pilates and for movement, seeing what she's doing, it's good to, hitch your wagon to her as you grow as well.
Yep. It was a great experience. I wouldn't have, it was sort of like right place, right time, right people, right energies. And it was really quite an amazing thing that I think we created. So that
is. And I have to say that, and just hearing that story, Claire, I have to thank you for taking time and energy for doing that, because indirectly that has impacted my Pilates career.
Oh, my pleasure.
You
See,
know
you
what I
never
mean?
know.
Like,
It's
you
like the
never
domino
know.
effect,
Absolutely.
you
So
know?
you fast forward 20, 30 years, and you're sitting here with someone in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, who took a Pilates course and didn't know the difference between peak, power, real, original, whatever. There's so many of them out there. I just take the first that was there and have a fantastic foundation for everything else. And I've stayed curious, and that was my launch for more authentic Pilates and for this classical thing here and whatever it is. So that was the base where I come back and say, oh, I learned that in Peak. Oh, that's what that meant when they put it like that. Oh, I understand why they. So thank you. Thank you so much for the work that you did back then.
Thank you for finding us. I think it's all, you know, and you're really lucky to have the teacher trainer that you had. I mean, Pam Garcia is, like, in my opinion, top notch for Peak, and continues to be a leader in that organization. So,
What was happening as well at that time when you were writing your curriculum? Because this is after the lawsuit, so then the world is now opened up for Pilates. Was there at the same time this scramble for everybody to get teacher training programs and to get their brand of Pilates out in the marketplace? Like, was there a scramble for everyone to do it at the same time?
I don't really know.
Yeah.
I don't really know what they were doing.
Yeah.
You know, certainly, you know, power was already established. Stott, of course, was extremely established. We just kind of kept our vision going, and Julie was extremely generous with how she compensated us for our time, and how she didn't interfere with our process, and that is, like, that's priceless to me. So,
Yes.
you know, then, you know, when they finally sold their company to Mad Dog,
Yes.
then things really started to shift around a little bit, because it was such a cute, nice, small company, right?
Yes,
and then you go big corporate, and you get like a different, you know, I don't know, different flow of energy from the top down.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's when I started focusing on Pilates Avatar, my audio program.
Yes.
And I started to put more energy into that. And I was, you know, now not full-time anymore with Peak, so I had the time to do that. And yeah, so.
Yeah, talk about the Pilates. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about the Pilates Avatar, because this is the genesis and the progression of where our Pilates space is going in many ways too, right?
Yeah, so, okay, so my husband and I like to do a hike. We were doing a lot of hiking at that time, and we were in a place in northwestern India.
Wow. Okay.
It's called Leh.
Okay.
And we yeah, so we were hiking there, and basically where there's no roads, you walk and walk and walk and walk. We had horses carrying our stuff, and we were in tents and things. And you just walk, and you run out of thoughts to think at a certain point, and so you just dream, you know. So I was in my dreamland as we're walking and walking and walking, and I thought, the other thing that was really kind of stuck in my craw a little bit, you could say, was that, you know, Pilates is so expensive. And it kind of made me feel sad that more people couldn't do it because of cost restrictions.
Yes.
So, for example, my husband's an ENT doctor, and, like, we would be at hospital functions, and one of the nurses might say to me, well, what do you do? And I would explain to them what Pilates is. And the first thing they would say is, like, how much does it cost? You know, it's sort of like personal training. Not everybody can afford a personal trainer.
Right.
And so I just started like thinking, what can I do to make Pilates more accessible to more people?
Yes.
What would that look like?
What would that look like? Yes.
What would it look like? And so I'm walking and just thinking, and so I had a whole keynote speech written by the time I was done that day. And this whole idea of Pilates Avatar was born. And I had a very dear friend who was also a mentor of mine in the fitness industry, Sherry Catlin, was visiting, and I was telling her about this idea, and she thought it was great, because it's an audio program. It's not video. It's not a subscription. You can have one workout that you can do and do and do and do. It's, if you do it regularly, it costs pennies per year by the end of the time. And so it was right when that movie Avatar came out.
Yes.
And we were just sitting around talking one day, and she says, yeah, you should call Pilates Avatar. And then we were like, well, what is an avatar? Well, it's like your best version of yourself. So, so there it was. And then I found a web guy that could create my website, and he was like a creative warrior, just a genius.
Yes.
And so, so we started rocking it.
Wow.
But I was the cameraman, I was the voice person, I was the editor. I mean, I learned all aspects of it. That's the other thing that I resonate with Jenna about, because she's like, you just have to figure it out, You got
to figure it out, right.
Just got to figure it out. And I, everything kind of came into place. And then I had to put my time in. empty hours of work. But I don't mind, because I feel like it's a labor of love.
Yes.
And, I always knew there was going to come a time when the idea would catch on stronger. And in the very beginning, some of the feedback that I got from teachers and studio owners, because I was trying to encourage at that time studio owners to bring it in as another option, right?
Yes, right.
And I, in the very beginning, I was getting a little bit of pushback, like people might be threatened that their clients wouldn't come to them anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not true. Nothing's going to replace a human teacher, right?
Right.
But to be able to come in 4 times a week or 3 times a week instead of once a week, wouldn't that be better for your business?
Right.
And wouldn't that be a better way to help your students become more independent? It's a stepping stone to becoming more independent.
Yes.
And isn't that what we're trying to do here? So I was feeling like, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but in the personal training world, which I came from, as well as the aerobics world, there was like kind of this weird relationship I could see trainers developing with their clients. And it was kind of not clean, in my opinion. It was a little codependent. I'm going to make you need me so I can keep getting paid.
Right.
And it's the opposite of trying to help people become more independent, in my opinion.
Yes.
And so I was like, let me take a look at how I'm operating. Am I operating that way? Am I helping people so that if I'm gone tomorrow, that they have the tools to continue on their own? Because after all, that's kind of what we are in the wellness field, right?
Yes, exactly. In the personal training world, I used to say that all the time, that there's this paradox, because you're teaching people and you're giving them all the tools to be on their own, and the better you do that, the more they're going to stay with you.
Exactly.
Which sounds weird, because I'm giving you everything to push you out the door, and then they stay because they're learning more about themselves. And those relationships get deeper and strong. And it isn't like you're not nurturing a dependency, you're nurturing an independence.
Exactly.
Which still grows your business. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the answer to I saw somebody say something about like group classes.
Semi-privates.
Semi-privates and group stuff. When that started to become more and more popular during the recession, like people had to figure a way to make Pilates a little bit more accessible.
Yes.
We bumped into a whole other set of issues in depends on how big is the semi-private. Is it 2, 3, 4, 5, 7? At what point is it a class? Because the teaching skill is different for a group than it is for a one-on-one session. It's just a little bit of a teaching dynamic. Right. And you can't actually, it's not always the greatest answer for each person involved.
Right. Now, it's interesting, Claire, with it, where Emmett's talking about semi-privates, like I had him on the show and we were talking about semi-privates, and there's 2 understandings of that phrase. One is the format that Joseph Pilates used in his studio, where people would walk in and they just do their own thing on their apparatus, feet float around, whatever. And then there's kind of like the, for lack of a better word, maybe the North American version of a semi-private, where it's like, it's not a large group class, but it's not a small group class. It's something in between where you're teaching everyone the same thing at the same time in a smaller format. So in saying semi-private, he's talking about that open gym format as opposed to the semi-private.
Open gym format. No, I think that's great. I mean, that's how Joe ran his studio, and that's the other place where Pilates Avatar can fit in as a stepping stone to becoming more independent. Is that, like, I can be teaching a one-on-one session and I can have 4 or 5 other people in the room with their buds in doing a workout, and I can kind of glance around and make sure they're being safe, give them a little push, give them a little pull, and still be right there with my client.
Yes.
And then, I basically doubled my income for the hour.
Right. Absolutely.
Or something. So
that's an interesting conversation to have, because there's a transition that we need to make within our Pilates studios, because everyone thinks that the gold star is a one-on-one private, but if we're trying to make Pilates accessible and we're trying to make more money than we can, like in just one client in 1 hour, because our time is limited by the fact that there's only one of me, then we need to think about different ways. So there's a lot of moving parts to getting our studios to an open gym format and getting our clients to think that they can do it on their own. And so it's an interesting conversation, because there's a lot of things that are happening in our Pilates, in the profession right now. Looking at open gym or looking at semi-privates, looking at mentoring versus just teacher training programs, so these are all the things that we need to consider as we move forward, and ask the question of what's going to happen when the world opens back up again, because it's not going back to normal. It's going to be a new normal.
Yeah. But yeah, it is. And I think that, having options that can work within, within somebody's work environment or whatever, that's going to be, that's going to be something that they'll figure out. Everybody will figure out. But the more options we have, the brighter our future looks, I think.
Yes.
Because there's not just one way to kind of, figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like in my world, I'm definitely not going back. Definitely not going back. Yeah, no, I kind of, I want to protect my time and invest my time where I feel like it's going to have the greatest impact.
Thank you.
Yes. So I'm probably going to have an open studio format, but I'm not going to babysit.
Exactly. But that's great. I don't know where we thought that babysitting was the way to go. Like, the reality is that we're supposed to be nurturing independence, and that's been one of the greatest things that has happened during this time of pandemic, when people can't come into a gym, is that they have to figure this out on their own. Online ownership, we are testing people. This is like a massive exam for our Pilates students now. Have you gleaned anything over the last 10 years you've been working with me? Can you figure this out on your own? What can you, what can't you do? And then come back into the studio and know that you're going to be moving more independently. You still have me, but I'm not going to give you 47 cues while you're moving. You're going to just go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm seeing Amy. Amy says we have 5 different revenue streams now. That's good business, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Diversifying your offerings, adding to what, so that we can, we can reach people where they're at.
Yes.
And give them more options within the studio. I think I can remember there was a time, I don't remember which year it was, Pilates had been really high up in the fitness trends.
Yes.
And then it kind of started dropping, but yoga, people were taking so much yoga. And I know in the Boston area, classes were bumper to bumper to bumper. But mat classes in the Pilates world would be like, how many people, I was teaching at the PMA conference, and I just, show of hands, how many people have 30 people in their mat class? Nobody's hands went up. How many people have 20 in their mat class? 1 or 2 hands. How many people have 10? How many people and like more people between, 5 and 10 people.
Yes.
In math class. But in a yoga class, you would have
100.
However many they could fit in, but their mats like,
yes.
Yeah.
So that's a question of accessibility?
I don't know. I can't tell. That's why I was kind of asking that question to the audience is, why do you think that is? I mean, one of the things, yoga is always so open to everybody. And Pilates always seems closed. We close our doors. So I go over to Equinox and try to pitch them Pilates Avatar. Oh no, we can't do that. We can't have people in the studio without it. We can't have that. Like, oh, okay. Because you would have to change your policies at the top to actually be of service to your customers. And, so I got to the policy lady. She's like, there's no way. I was like, that's kind of funny, because there was a time when Pilates started going mainstream. I don't know if you remember this conversation in the fitness world, was that you can't put reformers on the gym floor, like next to the dumbbell racks and and that was the genesis of that whole fear-based thing of closing the doors, not letting anybody in, and it kind of stayed with us.
Right.
Whereas like people are skipping down the street with their yoga mats, happy and going to class, and we're struggling to get people in our mat classes, and I don't really still understand why.
Yeah, right. Yes. I can make up a few different theories right now, but I really don't know either. Like I had a picture of my talk on the weekend. The city of Mississauga does open air fitness every summer. It's obviously going to change this summer, but where the city center, there's a massive green space. So I would teach a Pilates class there, and there would be 90 people, 100 people for that one class once a year. And then from that, I could say, well, did you know that there's Pilates classes in the city at these whatever? So they become like this entry-level class. Like it's almost like I look at like a funnel, a marketing funnel. We need to have that open class at the top of the funnel, that big, huge open mat class. And if they like that and that whets their appetite, then they can do, say 5 people in a reformer class, whatever it is. If they really like that, then they can do a private class. And that's almost like the funnel, but there needs to be some low threshold, low cost entry point for Pilates that people don't, get so stuffy about, right? So, and then also know for us as teachers that like obviously I can't get 100 people doing the absolute perfect roll up. We have to just get them moving safely and let them find freedom of movement, enjoy in movement, and also make it attractive enough that they'll want to move on to the next step. And to Emmett's point, the semi-private is the gold star as opposed to the private, when we can get people to a place where they can come into a room, do an open gym type workout independently because they know the work and feel comfortable with the work because they have the tools to make it accessible, and then they have it in their bodies. I think that really is our gold star. I agree with them on that.
Yeah, I'm reading also there's that yoga is perceived as a lifestyle and Pilates isn't, except amongst the teachers.
Yes.
I don't know. I kind of, maybe I'm biased because I'm a teacher,
Slightly,
it's hard for me to step out of it and into what it's like for students. But I think that any healthy habit is like considered a wellness lifestyle.
Yes.
Like the people that I know that do jogging or cycling or outdoor walking, or it's all about a well lifestyle.
Yes.
But I guess in the yoga world we do have like whole industries around clothing and accessories and full brands that are dedicated to that practice. And when they started putting zippers on the back of of workout wear, where that's not Pilates friendly at all.
Right. Yes.
You know, because we don't use zippers on our apparatus, right? Because it's in a upholstery. So yeah. So yeah. Anyway.
Right.
I don't have another point about that. But.
I know it's a good thought to continue to, like, those are the kind of things that I will continue, Claire, through the week, and we'll have a conversation around it and say, like, you know, where did the industry lose that notion of it being, why, like, how did yoga become a lifestyle and Pilates become this private work that we're dependent on one teacher in one space? Like, there's not this community around it in that way that there is around the yoga world. We touched on that with Brink on the weekend too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, it's a lot better than it used to. I mean, we have Pilatesology, we have Pilates Anytime, you know, so that's kind of been helpful to help bring things into people's homes and into people's life in an affordable way.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think there's always been a thing of what is Pilates anyway? What is Pilates actually?
That's
what
the
is
question.
It? And I attended some of the research forum. When was it? Last weekend or the weekend before? And I think it was Sherry Betts who was talking about how the industry meaning it was actually a PMA event, and it was the research forum. So you had different researchers presenting their papers or their work, and understanding what the categories of research are was very interesting for me, because I never really thought that just a general person could get out there and do a research, but you can actually.
Right.
But then she went on to say, like, we're defining what is Pilates. And so she had 3 terms, and they were kind of, you know, Pilates based.
Yes.
Pilates inspired, and there was a 3rd one, Pilates infused or something.
Okay. Yes.
In terms of recognizing where they are in the spectrum of what is Pilates. And they've been able, I think in 2019, the National Pilates Certification Program came out with their study guide. And now they can say, we can say as an industry, well, Pilates is this. These are the exercises that fall into that,
right?
For the most part. And if you have 50% of these exercises and 50% of, say, stretching or weight training or something like that, then, you know, you're going to be called maybe a Pilates
infused.
Yeah, and I forget what the actual, you know, hierarchy.
I follow you, because it's like piloxing or like yoga lattes and those sort of thing, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're like yoga on the reformer or things like that. So that we can kind of, as an industry, say this is who we are, you know, which will be kind of cool. To get away from the other terms of classical and contemporary and all that other stuff, but to define us around the work, because at least we know the mat work, right? It's written down in the book. Right. And we have been able to come up with an agreed upon, you know, set of reformer exercises and Cadillac exercises and chair exercises and so forth. Yes. So that's all a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Krista's comment there, like Mariska has this phrase, Pilates-ish, right? You know, and
it's like 100-ish.
100-ish. Yeah, exactly. Or my friend who teaches kettlebells, a friend of mine who's a kettlebell instructor, international guy, he says that there are exercises that we use a kettlebell for. So there's exercises with the kettlebell, and there are kettlebell exercises. And I think it's sort of like that, where we're saying that there's Pilates, there's exercises you do in Pilates, there's Pilates exercises, and there's exercises with Pilates equipment. So however we want to phrase it, there's some differentiation there and a celebration really of what we do, right? So
coming from the fitness world, group exercise, the aerobics, the flexibility classes, and then also being a personal trainer, that's all was kind of in my background. Yes. So that was where I was allowed to be creative and get really creative in the moves that I would create.
Absolutely.
And then with just as, and this is for me personally, for me with Pilates, I just teach what I was taught. Like I don't break out of that, but that's just me.
Yes.
And I instead try to improve the way I help people understand the way their body's moving.
Yes.
You know, that to me is more important than getting really fancy. Like I'm not fancy, but I'm really good. You know what I mean?
Good. Yes.
So like, you know what, like there's I love that. And I'm a totally different teacher if I'm teaching in my fitness hat.
Yes.
But that's kind of where I fall. Everybody's got to figure that out for themselves without judgment.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
without putting any judgment around it.
I love that. It's so good. Claire, we just like burned through so much time. I didn't even get to touch on, like you were saying about like earlier about inner strength and just like your message for right now, right? Like,
yeah, you know, it's I think one of the things I remember Romana used to say when we were actually in a lesson with Romana, she didn't want us to hold our energy in. She wanted us to express it out. You know, and so I think for me, there's so many parallels with life and with this work of Pilates. And so just the idea is to take all this strength that we build up inside of ourselves through our practice, through our disciplines, and let it out. Don't hold it just to ourselves. Yeah. And like you were saying earlier, everybody has gifts, everybody has strengths, and somehow share them. Share our energy out, share our love out. I mean, if I didn't share, you might not be sitting there right now, you said, because of my impact, my work with Pilates. So we all have these things. We don't even know where our touch will land.
Yes.
So, and that's kind of what got me thinking about this, the mentor program that I'm working on right now, is that I don't want to just keep it all to myself. Mm-hmm. It's not, it's to me is not doing a service. And I remember, learning as a kid, you don't get to keep what you don't give away.
Yes.
And the more you give, it sounds like a contradiction, the more you fill up. Yeah. So when you were saying earlier that you felt tired because of all you gave, I'm so used to that feeling. I've just come to understand it as building that muscle.
Yes.
Building that muscle. It's almost like an emotional hangover kind of, but not in a bad way, in a good way.
Right.
It's like you give so much and then all of a sudden it's void. You've given it.
Yes.
But, that's kind of a good place to be. I'm always very fragile after giving out that much. And Absolutely. I give myself a break, the day after, 2 days later, sometimes I journal around it. But I try to give myself a break. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt in the early part of Zoom teaching. Because last year I was teaching the Boston Ballet. As soon as we went down, because I'm on their wellness team, and you had all these people in this Zoom call, and they were so excited to see each other. There was often like tears and this and that, and it was so great just to work with them. And then all of a sudden we'd all say goodbye, and then there's this drop.
Yes.
Did you? And I think probably all of us that were teaching on Zoom, all of a sudden, the room went from being really active and alive, and it's like all of a sudden quiet. Went on mute.
Yep. There's like this vacuum. Everything's just emptied out of the space.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you're right. That's exactly it. But this gives me energy. These conversations really do, where as much as I sat home and just watched Marvel movies all day, it's good to come back to do. It's like, but I have Claire on Monday. So I really do appreciate it. I thank you so much. Like, this is a long time coming, these conversations to set this up. So thanks for our history lesson today as well. I learned so much about the origins of what we do.
Well, thank you. I see Gratz just kind of popped in.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just so, and it's so nice to meet you. I love the work that you're doing. spreading the word. You're reaching out, which is really wonderful, and giving a voice to be heard by all your followers of so many teachers.
Yes.
So
thank you
keep
so
up the
much.
good work.
Nice.
All right, my friend.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you to everyone who joined us today as well. I'm going to sign you off. And Claire, I'll send you the replay of this later, and then we'll just keep the conversation going.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you. Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Have a great day, everyone.